Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here. In today's video, I'm going to go over my full review of the Hitbox from hitboxarcade.com. Let's get started. So here is the Hitbox in all of its glory. It's got Sanwa buttons, so these buttons here, these ones here, these ones here, and this one are all Sanwa. This is 30 millimeters, which is the standard button that you'll find on most arcade sticks. And these are 24 millimeter buttons. These are usually reserved for the option buttons on most sticks. However, they are the main buttons on the Hitbox. On the top, there are 4 buttons here. These are not Sanwa buttons. And you can definitely feel that when you click them. They're a little more difficult to click, which again isn't a big deal. I actually prefer that they are a little more difficult to click as you don't accidentally press them. And I'll bring the instruction manual paper here. You can see touchpad, home button, share, and options, and start. And those are those 4 buttons right there. And yes, this is the up button. And this is down, and that does take a bit of time to get used to. And you can see the button layout for the rest. There are no button markings on the face of the Hitbox, so you will have to try to commit these to memory, maybe use the paper just for reference. If you are a fight stick user, you should feel right at home. If you are brand new to using a fight stick or a Hitbox, this will take some adjusting. So this cable here is 3 meters long. It is attached to the Hitbox itself. It's non-detachable, and it is nicely gold plated, so I did like that about it. Regarding it, I would like a detachable cable on something like this, considering this is metal and fairly heavy. However, it does have an attached cable. You can, however, put your own cable in if you feel like it. You will have to solder a little bit, and I'll show you that later. But if you want a detachable cable, you'll have to mod it in yourself. Now the dimensions of this are 16 by 7 by 2. So if you take the tape measure here, you can see roughly 16 inches, roughly 7 inches, and then this way it's about 2 inches. And just for a reference point of view, if I put both my hands on here, you can see that my hands take up most of the face of this. It's actually not very big. It's heavy because it's solid metal, but it is not very big. So that being said, when you do use it, I use the ridges here as a bit of a bump stop for my hand, similar to the Hori Fighting Stick Mini 4. I just have my hand pressed right up against there in order to hit the buttons. One comment I will make is that this plexi is very sharp around the edges. It's a bit of an annoyance. If you feel like it, you can always just take some sandpaper, some very fine sandpaper, and just lightly go over the edge in order to round it down just a little bit to take off some of that sharpness, because it is a fairly sharp corner. Try to get it to focus in, as you can see. Now when this was shipped to me, you can see here it was shipped slightly damaged. So the actual plexi is raised right there. I reached out to the guys at Hitbox and just said, hey, I took a picture of it, and let them know that my Hitbox arrived damaged. And they graciously sent me another plexi free of charge. And here's the new plexi that they sent me. You can see it is flat and not bent like my current one. So I haven't put that on yet. Eventually I will. And for those of you who are curious, I will flip this over and open it up. So these here are just little screws with rubber pads on them in order to hold this thing steady on the table. It's a nice little feature, although on your lap, they're not really used. Now there are quick disconnects on all of the buttons here, which is very, very nice, but you will notice they're also non-insulated. I would have liked to see some insulation on here, just those little plastic slip covers, but at the same time, it's not a big deal because these are wired in pretty well. In regards to cable management, I would have probably liked to see a little bit cleaner of a job, but at the same time, everything works, and since the back is a solid metal back, you don't see in here anyways. You can see here's the PCB. This is actually it's not an official Brooks fighting board, it's similar. So I think it's made by the same factory. It's just an off-brand, but it functions very similar to the Brooks PS3, PS4 fighting board. And two, just a word of caution, do not try to use the Brook official firmware for this. Use the firmware that's on the Hitbox site. There have been problems when people have tried to use Brook firmware on here. I think these might be ever so slightly different than the Brook boards themselves. You can see this is the cord here, and it is actually just kind of soldered to the board, as well as fixed in by this little rubber here. So that is the inside. These little white clips here hold the plexi in place of the front of the Hitbox. Now, to get used to the Hitbox, it's actually fairly easy if you are coming from keyboard. If you're coming from a fight stick, it might be incredibly difficult to use, or to at least get used to. If you're coming from a controller, again, I think these buttons here will actually be more difficult to get used to than the controls. So I had a couple of people use this while I was at Canada Cup just to get their feedback on it, and they struggled with the jump button here, it being a dedicated button, and they also struggled with the fact that there were no angle buttons. So with a Hitbox, you have to be very, very precise. You cannot get lazy with your inputs because everything has a specific button. For example, if you go to roll forward, if you just want to do a fireball, you have to roll your fingers in such a way that you do hit down and forward at the same time, or else you will get a separate motion for down, a separate motion for forward. So you do have to press them both at the same time in order to get that diagonal forward, and it is sometimes difficult. So for example, if you wanted to throw a fireball in Street Fighter, you'd be down, forward, punch. So just come out like this. And you can see here, part of the issue is if I hit down, let go of down before I hit forward, it's not going to register the diagonal movement and you won't throw a fireball. And that's what I mean is you can't get lazy. You have to be very, very precise with this. So the second issue that I see people have was with the jump button. A lot of people were trying to use it like this, and it was getting in the way of the motions with their hand. I actually use my right hand to do the jump. So the thumb on my right hand I use. I can still hit all the buttons perfectly fine for the punches and kicks, and then jump is actually pretty easy, and that helps me focus on the movements with my one hand. Just dedicate one hand strictly to movements, jumping and hitting buttons for punching and kicking, dedicated to my other hand. So I kind of just split the Hitbox itself kind of like this. So these buttons all here are for my right hand, and all of these buttons here are for my left hand. And it seems to work very well for me that way. I actually like using it that way. And when I went to an arcade stick, funny enough, it presented a bit of an issue because to jump, I started hitting light kick. Now, one issue that I did run into with Canada Cup, a couple of my inputs weren't working. So for example, I actually didn't have access to medium punch, and I play Ryu. So in Street Fighter V, medium punch is the starter for a few of his combos, and that presented a bit of an issue because the button wouldn't always register. So I was struggling a little bit there, and I found out the issue was actually one of the cables underneath in the board was dislodged. I'm assuming this was due to shipping. I actually didn't notice it at home at all when I was using it on PC. However, when I brought it home after Canada Cup, the issue was there. So I opened it up, had a look at all the wires, and sure enough, one of the wires was slightly dislodged. So I just hooked that back up and I was good to go. So if you do order these, I would highly recommend just checking the internals, making sure everything is plugged in correctly. These things get bumped around quite a bit when they're shipping, and cables can easily become dislodged. The other issue that I had with this was actually I could not get it into PS3 mode whatsoever. I tried button combinations. I actually tried putting it into PS3 mode for about a half hour as I was trying to play Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. And for that, you need a Xbox 360 or a PS3 joystick. And unfortunately, I could not get this to work with that game at all. I believe it is an issue with the board. And furthermore, on PC, this seems to be direct input only, so there is no specific X input mode that I was able to find. Therefore, this is strictly a PS4, appears to be strictly a PS4, as well as a PC direct input mode. It does not have X input, which a lot of games require. It does have direct input only. So if you are buying this for the PC, you might want to take a look at the Xbox One version. If you are using or are purchasing this for a PS3 use, or you want it for PS4 and PS3, you might need to purchase either a Brook converter or just a Brook fighting board and place that on the inside.
So as always, what I like about the Hitbox, what could use some improvements, and my overall thoughts. First and foremost, what I like about the Hitbox. I like that the case is built very well. It's built out of metal, it is very sturdy, and I like that. The overall design is good. I really like the use of the 24mm buttons instead of the standard 30mm buttons. It's a little to get used to coming from an arcade stick, but ultimately it works very, very well. The buttons are positioned extremely well for what they need to do. I'm glad that they went with Sanwa buttons, considering this is priced at $199. It would make sense for them to use a name brand button. I would actually be upset if it wasn't a name brand button for that price. The customer service was great, so I did have an issue with the plexi being damaged upon shipping, and I reached out to the guys at Hitbox. They sent me another plexi free of charge right away, and I was very happy with that. I also like that this Hitbox is moddable, so all you really have to do is unscrew the back panel and you have access to everything in there. There's quick disconnects on all the buttons. You can swap them out very, very easily. What could use some improvements on the overall Hitbox? First and foremost, the case is slightly narrow, so this will bother some people who do like a full palm rest. The plexiglass itself is slightly sharper on the edges, so if that does bother you, you will have to take a very, very, very fine sandpaper and just sand it down ever so slightly because there is a bit of sharpness there. I also wish there was a detachable cable. The cable is non-detachable and I'm not the biggest fan of that. Just due to the overall shape, there isn't really anywhere to put the cable. You kind of just have to wrap the cable around the Hitbox itself. And the internal PCB is not the greatest. So that's the board on the inside. I could not get it to work with a PS3 no matter how hard I tried, no matter what button combination I tried when I plugged it in, it would not work. On PC, it's direct input only. This is the PS4 stick. I believe that the Xbox One or Xbox 360 one will be slightly different, although I did not try that. All I know is that if you are purchasing this for PC use, I highly recommend picking up the Xbox One version. However, if you're purchasing this strictly for PS4 use, then it'll be fine. If you're using it on PS3, you will have to mod it. So my overall thoughts, first and foremost, it's a very great alternative to a controller or a fight stick. This was a lot of fun to use. I really liked it. The buttons are very, very quick. You move a lot quicker left and right as opposed to a controller or a fight stick. I really, really liked it. It is surprisingly good for side scrollers. So I used this with Shovel Knight and it worked very, very, very well. I actually prefer using this over a keyboard or gamepad to play Shovel Knight, as it worked awesomely. It's not very common, so this is a pro and a con. When I was at Canada Cup, it generated a lot of attention because not many people had one at all, so a lot of people were curious and wanted to try it out. At the same time, it is a con, so if you do run into this, and let's say you've put a ton of hours into getting good with this, and then you run into an issue, you will be very hard pressed to find someone who has one of these that you can borrow. It is a very, very good starter option if you're looking at getting into a Hitbox. It is priced at $199. However, if you are hesitant or on the fence about it, there is a more expensive version, and that's Jason's Customs. So Jason's Customs has a slightly more expensive version. It's a little different overall. You can head over to his website and check it out. It is more or less the Rolls-Royce version of this. This is a very, very good starter option. I don't actually know of any other options that are the same price. You could build your own, but if you just want a pre-built stick, this is a very, very good option to get into a Hitbox. That's all I've got for today. Please let me know what you think about the Hitbox in the comments below. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. That's all I've got for today. Thank you, everyone. Take care.